Excellent. Well, thank you everyone for joining us for our Thursday night author series. My name is Julie and I'm the events manager at Roundabout Books in Bend, Oregon. If you're joining us from outside of Central Oregon, thank you so much. One of the things that Zoom has afforded us these last 15 or 16 months is being able to have authors and guests from further away than we've ever had. We've had events recently where people joined us from the UK. We had an author event with someone who was in Australia. So as much as we miss people in the store, I'm so grateful that this has allowed us to keep these events going and keep getting the word out about these awesome authors. So tonight we are joined by Willy Vlautin, who has visited the Central Oregon area a couple of times for events. So many of you are probably familiar with him and his works. I'm going to do a quick bio for you because it's quite impressive. So Willy Vlautin has been the recipient of 3 Oregon Book Awards, the Nevada Silver Pen Award, and was inducted into the Nevada Writers Hall of Fame and the Oregon Music Hall of Fame. He was a finalist for the Penn Faulkner Award and was shortlisted for the Impact Award International Dublin Literary Award. 2 of his novels have been adapted as films, and his novels have been translated into 11 languages. He currently teaches at Pacific University's MFA in Writing program and lives near Portland with his wife, dogs, cats, and horses. And I really appreciated the inclusion of your animals in there. I think that's the best thing about, bios. So the book we're going to talk about tonight is your 6th book, The Night Always Comes. The description is you're exploring the idea of the American dream and the impacts of gentrification, greed, and opportunism on ordinary working class lives. This scorching noirish tale follows a young woman, Lynette, over the course of 2 days and nights as she endeavors to secure the money needed to buy the house she rents with her mother and developmentally disabled brother. So first of all, thank you again so much for being here, everyone, and Mr. Vlautin. Tell us, in your own words, a little bit about this book, and then I have a couple of questions, and I think we'll just have a little conversation.
That's cool. I live outside of Portland now, but I've lived in, like you, I lived in all parts of Portland since the early 90s or mid 90s. And just, 5 years ago or 6 years ago, I just started noticing, you drive downtown Portland and you'd notice there would be 10 to 15 cranes, meaning 10 to 15 new buildings going up. And it was happening at such a rapid pace that it was kind of breathtaking. And then I live 30 miles north of Portland, but I rent an office in a part of Portland called St. John's. It's like a little working class neighborhood that I've always really loved. And in the last 5 years, I've noticed just from my window, it's about the size of a bedroom. It's it's like an old Sam Spade detective agency office. Really, it's really cool. But just looking out my window, I can see 5 apartment buildings that have gone up, and one that right next door to me that's going up right now. And the housing prices, like in Bend too, I guess, are just going through the roof. I mean, they're changing so dramatically that again, it was just kind of breathtaking. And I always equate it to, it's like you're walking down the street and all of a sudden everybody's driving by in cars. And you're like, how did they get cars when I'm still walking? Like, it just is changing so fast. And I wanted to write a story about, seeing if a kind of a beat up, dysfunctional working class family could figure out how to survive in a city that's economy is changing so fast. So I was interested in that, and the idea of greed. I was interested in the idea of opportunism. So all these I always write where I have bigger themes that I start with, and then I'll write a story around those themes. And I was interested in again, like, I always think, like, every time you go to a grocery store or walk down the street, everybody you meet or pass by is struggling with something. Somebody in their family's hurting. Somebody just lost their job. I mean, everybody's carrying burdens, and I just wanted to pick one family and write about their do they have the ability to jump on the gentrification train, or like, are they going to be able to survive and have a home ownership in a city like Portland, or is this city not meant for them to have a regular house, like the American dream, the idea of home ownership? So I was mixing all those things in this story, and because of the change of the cities happening so fast, and I mean, you could argue like Reno, where I grew up, is changing that fast. Seattle, San Francisco, those big cities that are just, they're changing on such a level that a lot of working class people can't survive there. It's happening so fast in Portland. I felt like it was panicky. It made me nervous. And I mean, I'm doing okay, but it made me nervous. So I wanted the novel to have a nervous feel to it, like a noir feel, like a desperation to it, to kind of mirror the feeling of the city to me. So that's why I wrote this one. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So what a lot of people might not realize is the time from when you start writing a book until it's picked up, whether or not you already have an agent, et cetera, an actual publication, can be a couple of years. But I wanted to ask you if you had any thoughts or, the parallels, especially with the Kinney family on Mississippi. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this story in Portland,
Yeah.
the Red House on Mississippi.
Yeah.
I mean, as soon as I started reading this book, I was like, wait, that sounds, I mean, you can exactly find that family that this is literally happening to.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'd already finished the book. You're right in the fact, like, you'll sell a book, and then it'll be a year and a half at least until it comes out. And when I've always written them first, like I'll write it until it's really done as I can get it before I even show it to anybody. Mm-hmm. So by the time I show it to my editor, I've already worked on it a couple years, and then they'll have it another over a year and a half. Yeah. So yeah, but yeah, I mean, the sad thing is those stories happen all over. Oftentimes they don't get the coverage.
Right.
But you're right. That's very similar.
One of the things I really liked in the beginning of it is, we're told this only happens over 2 days, and that's really unusual in most books. I mean, maybe you'll have a shortened time period of like a week or two, a vacation. So it's like, well, how do you get that information to what's going on when we're only talking about 2 days? And I noticed that it was immediate, but it didn't feel rushed. As soon as she starts having the conversation with her mom, you're just like, you're in it. I know exactly what has happened leading up to this point, and it's only been 10 pages.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I did want it because of the kind of the panicky feel of a city changing so fast. I wanted it to have that, like I said earlier, like that kind of really intense, panicky feel. But yeah, you work a lot on trying to get the flow of something like that. I mean, I'm not the best writer on the first drafts. Usually the first drafts, I just kind of get the story down. And then the only thing if I'm good at anything, it's that I like tinkering. And so I'll just edit a story over and over. So I rewrote this story 14, 15 times, pulled out 200 pages, put in another, 50 pages, say. And so I'm always kind of whittling and hoping I get the flow right. And you take some chances. Like I took a few chances with the long arguments between the mom and the daughter. But my experience is like deep-seated long family arguments. They either erupt and disappear within 30 seconds or they go on and on.
Yeah.
And so I was interested in starting out with the family dynamic and running on that. And it's pretty intense. You're right. It starts off pretty intense.
Yeah. And the family dynamic, the mother and daughter is, it's so intense right away. And for me personally, I immediately am on Lynette's side. I'm like, you said you were going to do this thing and we need a roof over our head. And when her mom in one of the very first arguments starts bringing up like her running away, there was a moment where I'm like, man, I think the mom is still really hurt. But again, I was still just like, I'm on Lynette's side.
Yeah, I mean, what I was trying to do, there was a few things with that. With the mom, I think it's all about this struggle. For those who haven't read it, it's a mom, a 30-year-old daughter, a 32-year-old developmentally disabled brother, and then the mother. And they've kind of stuck together. The mom and the daughter have kind of stuck together on and off for most of their lives for the brother. And so they have a chance to buy their rental house that they've lived in for 30 years. The landlord's selling it, and he's a decent guy. He wants to give them a deal. And Lynette has really bad credit and can't get a loan, but her mom can. So they have to partner up. And the daughter says, look, I'll get the down payment. And the mom can only get 2/3 of the loan. And the daughter says, look, I'll get 1/3 of it. And being the down payment if we do this, because it's the only way we'll be able to stay in our neighborhood. We'll be able to own our own house, and we won't keep having to move as rents get higher and higher. And then the mom, and I don't think it's giving too much away, the mom within the first 12 or 13 pages buys a new car instead, and then it all starts falling apart. And so I was interested in the idea of this mom. I think realizes that in a lot of ways she's breaking up with her daughter, and that first argument, you kind of get the sense like she keeps throwing the past at Lynette, because I think she's scared of Lynette and wants to keep making her off kilter, and she wants to deflect or distract Lynette from the fact that she's sabotaging them and wanting to break free of her. And she doesn't want this beat up, tear down house. And so it's a complicated relationship for sure between the mom and the daughter, that's for sure. But intense and pretty fast.
Well, and it's a really complicated house, because they say it almost immediately. They haven't complained about anything that needs to be fixed, in the hopes that he won't raise the rent. So just, keep quiet and everything will be status quo. So then he wants to sell it. And her mom has a little bit of a point. They've already paid rent for however long. They're going to buy the house for, isn't it like $275?
Yeah, 280, which yeah.
Which is a deal. But at the same time, her mom's like, so we're going to spend all this money and then not have any money to fix it up. My sister just went through this here in town, finally was able to buy a house, and now has to put another like $50,000 in it to fix it up.
Yeah, I was interested in the idea too, that the mom, I mean, in a bigger framework, the novel's about like to give up or to try. Right. And I think the mom's saying like, what's the point, like, of buying a house, such an expensive house that 10 years ago was, or 15 years ago was 1/3 of the price, and not worth that hardly. And so her argument is there's no point in chasing this. It's not worth it. And the daughter is saying like, this is our only chance to have that so-called like American dream. So that's true. And then to go back to your asking how long that book took, is when I started the book, I was probably 3 or 4 years ago, really. 280 was kind of cheap. 280,000, which is a house price, and now it would probably be closer to 4. Would be a good deal on that house. And that just shows you again how fast housing prices are going up, and how kind of frightening it is if you hadn't been able to buy a house in a city like Portland.
Yeah, absolutely. And the mom has a point too of, she's going to sign this loan and they're going to be shackled to this house, and in essence shackled to each other.
Yeah.
Because, she can't take care of Kenny on her own, and neither can Lynette. And it's supposed to be this like symbiotic relationship, but, it sounds like they do want to get away from each other, but obviously cannot.
Yeah, I think Lynette, I mean, the interesting thing about her, I think, is that she was born to, at age 10, like and then another idea I was working on with that novel is like the decline or the breaking apart of the family. And when the grandparents kind of represent that old stability. And
Mhm.
when the grandfather dies and that starts fading away, their family starts falling apart. They don't have anybody that's stable, that has money and has that kind of like that idea that you can make it. The confidence. I think when grandfather dies, all that disappears. And so you're left with this a mom and a mom just struggling by as a waitress and at the beginning. And I think what happens is Lynette gets thrown into this role of taking care of her brother, uh, from age, say, 10 on. She becomes a caregiver, not a daughter, not a kid, but a caregiver to her brother. um, and I think that's kind of shaped her. And so when you meet her at 30, she's kind of shaped to that, and she's codependent on her brother. I don't think she's never done well when she's left the home. She doesn't do well without taking care of her brother because it's kind of her identity, and I think it's kind of hard for her to shake it because she's been doing it her whole life.
Yeah.
And so yeah, there's definitely some family dynamic stuff going on in there. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think I want to go ahead and open it up to some
Sure.
questions from our audience, because I know Greg logged in early and is a fan of yours. So if anybody has a question, comment, anything like that, feel free. You can unmute yourself. You can raise your hand and I can unmute you. Let's see if we've got any questions right now. I love Zoom sometimes.
Yeah.
Well, I can say a word or two, but it's the first it was Lean on Pete. I saw the film. I thought, well, I'll read the book, and I was totally unprepared for just how dark it was, and yet the writing it was just absolutely wonderful how everything is revealed without any judgment. This kid doesn't put anything on any of the experiences that he's having as being odd or strange in any way. It's just that he's observing it and taking it all in, and thinks that he's going to be able to do all right. And it's overwhelming. So I nominated it for the Oregon Battle of the Books, thinking, well, this would be a good one for high school because it reminded me of Huckleberry Finn. It was like Huckleberry Finn for the modern age. And I think that it is. However, without any without any of the jokes, and with Pete in the place of Jim. And it was a marvelous piece of work, but
Wow.
it was so devastating at all levels. And then after, don't
Oh,
the
don't
book,
skip out on me.
don't skip out on me. So you've got the horse racing scene, then you've got the boxing scene, and Golden Globes, as though you can be a champion. And it's like, no, no, none of these are set up for you to be a champion. They're all set up for a bunch of grifters to take advantage of you for the low life scene that you just have no idea you've entered into. And so I wasn't expecting something to be about buying a house because that sounds almost uplifting compared to all the other things that I've seen. But I'm just amazed by your work. And then, of course, with the film, Lean on Pete, then I'm listening to the music at the end, and I thought, who the hell wrote this? This is the strangest song I've ever heard. I love it, but I don't understand it. But it's like, what kind of writer is this? So I'm terribly impressed with your work.
Jeez.
And yeah. And I just, it's you're just blowing open a lot of things that, for Oregon, especially when you're dealing with the lack of social services in this country. I can't think of anything more relevant right now than the writing that you're doing. I just
Oh,
want to thank you for that.
that's really nice. Nice
Yeah.
of you to say. Yeah. Lean on Pete started when I moved to Portland from Reno in my mid 20s, and I worked at a trucking company, and and I was really homesick. It was too big a city for me, Portland. And I didn't know, but I couldn't go home. So I had to stick around. And so what I did is I went to the places that made me feel like Reno, and I found Portland Meadows, because all the people gambling in Portland Meadows felt like a Reno casino to me. And so for years, I would guess over 10 years, I wrote my stories out at the track. They have those big tables, and no one ever went there. I mean, I think the place held it when it was open, it held 10,000 people. And on a good day, there'd be 200 to 300 people scattered all throughout. So for years and years, I wrote novels out there, but I made 2 mistakes. And one of them was I fell in love with the horses, and I fell in love with the jockeys, and it's too heartbreaking. And so Lean on Pete was a novel. It was a novel about a few things for me, but one of them was me breaking up with horse racing. And it was with the book I wrote. So I would quit going to the track because the more I learned about it, the darker it is, especially at that level. And so that the horse racing aspect of that book was me trying to give up horse racing, which I did. And then I rented the office I have right now. But thank you for that.
Sure.
That's interesting, the comparison of Reno to Portland. When I was 24, I lived in Reno for half a year. And from Bend to Reno, I felt completely like a fish out of water. I thought Reno was so big.
Yeah. Well, when I grew up, Reno was like Bend 10 years ago or 15 years ago. It was a small city. And then it grew so much, but I left Reno. I always liked it there, but it was a hard place to be a guy that likes books and music at that time. I mean, so I had to move to a city that was more open to weirdos. I guess you like book lovers. But yeah, it was real hard. Portland was real. I mean, I've met nothing but great people here, but it's hard to live. If you're from a smaller town to move to a big city, it's kind of intimidating. That's for sure.
Yeah. Does anybody else have a question or comment? Oh, yes. Hold on.
Hey, Willie, I have a question. Maybe following up a little bit on what Greg said about Lean on Pete, the movie. How do you feel about movies being made of your books, and how are you involved in those scenarios?
Well, I mean, first off, it's just fun. I mean, if you don't take it seriously, it's fun. I mean, you get a paycheck, which is great. And the thing I learned about movie people is that they really, the people that are making the movies, they love literature, they love music, and they love movies. So my favorite 3 things are those. So you're surrounded by people that are doing cool stuff and interesting. I guess, with my first book, The Motel Life, I sold the movie rights to this guy, and he's a really kind of famous guy, and he seduced me into why don't you write the screenplay? We'll make this movie together. So I spent 6 months at Portland Meadows writing the screenplay, and then I mailed it off to him, and I never heard from him or his people or whatever, and they gave me a check for it, and I was happy to cash the check. But I realized, 6 months, 7 months past that went by, and I never heard from him. And I'd email him once in a while and go, "Hey, how you doing? Did you ever read it?" And he's like, "Read it? You sent it to me?" And send it to me again. And I said, "Okay." I sent it to him again, and then I wouldn't hear from him for 4 or 5 months. And what I realized is I can waste my life doing that kind of stuff, chasing movies. I'm not smart enough to navigate it. To be the movie business people are like genius car salesmen, because what they're doing is they're trying to get all these moving parts together without dropping any of them. So you want to get the actor committed, you want a good writer, you want a good director, you want the money man, and you're juggling them all, and it's like a pyramid scheme, really. And I realized early on I wasn't smart enough to navigate that, and I didn't want to write 7 months of my life for something that the guy won't even return my call. So I haven't had that much involvement in it. At times I wish I would have. there's times where like authenticity wise, you're like, please don't do what you're going to do. I know you think you should do this, but it's not like that. And those decisions always kind of haunt me, but in general, it was a great experience. Both those movies, everybody was nice to me. You get a few free dinners. I paid off my house, that kind of stuff. So, and it frees you up not to be so worried, so you can write the kind of stuff you really want to write.
I think that was my question. Like, I'd be worried about, your own art being misrepresented, but the other side of things, it allows you to do things that you want to do. So I imagine it's a little bit of a moral challenge in some ways. And
yeah, you can't have it both ways. You can't take their money and say, I don't want anything to do with it. Why did you screw up and ruin my life with this bad thing? You can't do both. So I just decided, you sell it to the people that are most interested, that you think are the smartest, and will do the best job. And another thing to remember, like with movies, is they want it to do well, and they're risking, like a director is risking his whole career on your story, because no one, like you write a novel and nobody buys it, and then you write another one and hope it sells a little bit. But no one's going to give you $8 million to make another movie if you wrote one that's horrible. I mean, if you made a movie that no one likes, or it was horrible, it's really hard for a director to get that chance again. So they have a lot more to lose on it than I do, and I'm respectful of that. And I know, like in my case with the two movies they did make, both those directors tried really hard to do a good job. And yeah, but you can't have it both ways. Like, you can't take their money and say, I don't want any part of it, and then complain. That's, you can't, you can't. I have done that secretly, but
So I guess my last question is, do you feel like they were pretty faithful representations of your novels? Or
yeah, I think they both tried. I think, there's things I like about both of them. I love the Motel Life because it's set in Reno, and it's shot in all the places I grew up going to. So as a document, I like that. I think they missed a few things, but they didn't understand it enough. As I always look at, like, John Huston, the great director, who did like Treasure Sierra Madre and Misfits, among other, Wise Blood. But he had this, I always think about him because when he made a movie, you never kind of question its authenticity, because I think he was living it and in those situations. And I think my only complaints with either of them would be that authenticity, but I do like them both.
I mean, just from somebody who read your books before I saw the movies, I feel like they're pretty good representation. To be something that, it's hard to know because I'm not you, but yeah, I feel like there's some authenticity or genuineness. I didn't feel like I was shamed in watching.
No, and they were true to the story. And the lucky thing with the Motel Life, they shot that movie in Reno when they didn't have to, and I was really proud of that. And then they shot Lean on Pete in Portland, and it was all shot in Oregon, and they didn't have to do that either. There's more attractive money tax break places. So I was really grateful for that. And I was grateful that Portland Meadows let him shoot the movie there before they closed. So I was really grateful for that. It's always fun to think that, like, your little stories making an economy for a few people work for a while. That always made me feel good, that aspect.
Thanks a lot, man. That's great. I appreciate it.
Sure. Thanks for the question.
Thank you. Definitely. All right. I thought I saw another hand up before. Yeah, hold on. I'm going to unmute you. So it should pop up on your iPad to unmute. There you go.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi, Willie. So I've read all your books.
Hey, thank you.
And I'm really sad that Paulina Springs couldn't get you, but you're too famous now. We're kind of.
No, I don't think
I'm giving you that.
No, but I always love going there. And so maybe when it opens up again, I'll get to.
Yeah, we got a new owner, and I just gave him the whole chapter and verse. You've got to get Willie, and he goes, "Well, I tried." Anyway, what I wanted to say, I've read all your books. and they're hard, they're not happy books, but there's a thread through them that I think makes them so valuable, is that there's good in people, and you always bring that out. These characters are they're hard, they're hard luck characters. They really have tough lives, and yet there's always that person or people, but usually just one person, who makes a huge difference to them and enables them to maybe like get the house, or I don't know. To me, that's your golden ticket there, is that you really talk about hard subjects. You talk about people who really have tough lives, and yet there's somebody usually in their life who gives them just a little boost up. And I think that's what makes it so it's not just a
Oh, I know. Yeah, no, I'm a dark-minded guy. I know.
I know you are. Yeah.
And I guess first, I've said this before, so I apologize, but if I've said it, but when I grew up, there was, I think, from 8th grade to junior in high school, I read all of Steinbeck's work in high school. So I like studied his books, or like I had a teacher explain them all to me by the time I was, all his major stuff, by the time I was 16. And then at the same time, I had my mother was a single mother with my brother and I, and she worked with a lot of kind of drifter Reno guys, like we called them the guys that live by the river. And her boss would hire and try to rehabilitate guys. So my mom was always really interested and obsessed with being homeless, because I think she was just scared about it, because she was a single mother with 2 kids, and she was one of those kind of people that would tell you about how scared she was every night she got home from work. She was kind of obsessed with it. She was always like, oh, you're only 2 or 3 bad moves away from living in your car if you don't have a big family to lean on. So remember that. So I think I always, and I think that along with Steinbeck at an early age, it just kind of gets in your DNA of those kind of stories. And then, and I think sadly for my personal state is that I've never been able to have any job besides like a house painter and trucking company kind of guy. So I've always written about those kind of stories, because those were the only kind I really knew. And so that's why I've always written those kinds of stories. And I think that my characters have such kind of big, dense, intimate times, and struggle so hard. It's just what I'm interested in, and my own struggles. Like if I write about Horace Hopper and Don't Skip Out on Me, it's just because he's a kid that I really related to. Or Lynette, I can just relate to their struggles, and for some reason, I think I learned it as a kid. I get comfort from writing stories about people who are struggling, because as a kid, I did it, and it just makes you feel less alone when you're around somebody that's going through the same sort of stuff you are, even if you have to make it up and write about it. And I think also when I started writing, I wrote about things that haunted me and scared me in hopes that they wouldn't haunt me and scare me anymore. I had this idea: if you write about something that scares you, then you won't be scared of it anymore. And it hasn't exactly worked, but I haven't quit trying.
Well, keep going. They're very authentic. It's obvious you're writing about stuff Yeah, it's really genuine.
Yeah, I think even as a kid, I think I was like, well, why can't my mom be a hero in a story? She was a secretary, or like I always would get crushes on waitresses, or like checkers at grocery stores, and you're like, why can't my favorite checker be a hero? Well, why does it have to be some Ivy League guy, or why can't she be a hero? Or like I was a janitor for a while, and I was like, why can't a janitor ever be the hero of a story? He deserves his own story. And so I was always writing those kind of stories. Even like when I started out writing songs as a kid, you know, like 11, 12, and I was writing these really, for whatever reason, man, I was writing these really depressing, like story songs about those kind of characters that I didn't know much about, really, just like would hear or see them, but I felt like them. So I guess, you know, I felt kindred spirits to those kind of rougher edged people or guys wandering around downtown Reno. I always assumed I'd either be like them, or you know, would live next door to them in some fashion. So that's kind of where it all comes from. And then there's Genius Liz, the library queen. Hi, Liz.
There you go.
Really good to see you.
Good to see you as well.
Really great book. I love everything you do, for sure.
Oh, you're very nice.
So as soon as, well, we're ready to open up. So I think you should come down and be in person.
I would love to do that.
Okay, let's chat.
Okay.
So speaking about your characters, do you find that as you're crafting the book, and the characters starting to kind of reveal more about themselves, do you see them as kind of an amalgamation of people you've known, or do you start to notice and like maybe you're seeing characteristics of someone you really know, whether you meant to or not, like suddenly that character is acting like that?
You know, I mean, not to get, I guess this is just the truth, really, which is, you know, my mom was really anti-art, and she was really ashamed that I was in a band and really ashamed that I wrote stories. And so I told myself early on I would never, ever write about my family at all. If I did, what I always said was like, if I'm any kind of fiction writer, I'll make, you know, if it's my dad, I can make my dad a 15-year-old high school girl and say the same thing. Or if it's my mom, I can make my mom a 70-year-old truck driver, a man truck driver, and I could say the same things that I needed to say personally if I wanted to vent on them or whatever. So I never write about true people unless it's like unless it's an inside joke to a friend of mine, or if it's some kind of weird guy I met somewhere that I don't know his real name and he wasn't a friend of mine. It was just a character you'd come across, or says something, you know, those kind of people you meet every day that just say something weird. I'll put them in realistically. Yeah. But other than that, I changed names and faces and body shapes and all that, because my desire was never to hurt anybody in my family or even go there. I just wanted to tell these certain kinds of stories. So yeah, I never really done that intentionally anyway, maybe. But even my brother has always been a real supporter and a really good guy to me about my writing and stuff. And he can never pick out stuff. You know, he can pick out the soul of it. He'll go, oh man, this is about that time in it. And I'll go, how did you know? And he goes, because I'm your brother. That's how I know, you know.
That's awesome. All right. Do we have any more questions or comments?
Oh, I think we got one from Ann.
Yes.
Hi.
I'm just starting the book with Lynette, and I just want to say I am so appreciative of your language and just bringing me right in to her life and her circumstances and her struggles. I mean, I didn't want to put the book down. It was just, and it's, you have a very, I think, unusual, I don't know, I don't often pick up a book where I'm so drawn in and so touched by the characters and the reality of the characters. I mean, it's just real. And I know, because I know Portland and I know struggles of people in Portland, it is so, yes, right there. These are real people in real situations and they're real issues. And I am just so appreciative of the way you do this, and I'm looking forward to reading some of your other work, because it's just soul grabbing. And I really appreciate what you're doing in your writing.
Oh, that's really nice of you to say that. I really appreciate it. You know, I think when I started writing when I started writing seriously, I was like 18, 19. And then what I always wanted to do was write, at the beginning, I wanted to write novels because I grew up with mostly kind of redneck guys that didn't, you know, they read Cliff Notes in high school, maybe. But they probably never really read a real novel that they weren't forced to at gunpoint to read. And I always really wanted to write novels that you could get a guy to read after work. They were like simple but intense, like really intense, and hopefully written with kind of like a blood, you know, like they grabbed you, but also were simple enough to where you could read them where you're tired. They'd help carry you through it. So that was always been something I've at least tried to do.
Well, I think you do it very successfully.
Oh, thank you. All right. You made me feel good tonight.
Thank you, Anne.
I really appreciate that, Anne.
All right. Do we have any more? Yes, Sue. There you go. Did it unmute? There we go.
There was a really interesting, well done article in the bulletin today in the entertainment section that talked a lot about your music. And I'm just wondering if you think of yourself as a musician who likes to write books or an author who likes to perform music, and do they feed on each other?
Well, it depends which day of the week, really. Like if I'm writing bad or something goes bad in my writing world, I'm like, well, what do you expect? I'm a musician. I can't, you know. And if it's bad, if my music career is going down, or you know, so I get some bad news that way, I'll go, well, what do you expect? I'm not a real musician. I'm just a writer trying to be a musician. So they've taken the pressure off each other. I think naturally I'm more of a writer because I like the grunt work of writing. I like the solitude, and I like the grind of writing. Writing's just, it takes a long time, and it's more like you're digging it. I always think of it, it's like kind of like you're just digging a ditch, and it takes a really long time to get where you're going. But I've always liked that. But as a kid, I wasn't very good in school, and I didn't have any confidence. And I love disappearing into songs. I love the idea that when you put a song on, you suddenly weren't you anymore. You were inside the song, if it was the right kind of story song. And as a kid, I really needed that. And I was really attracted to like folk songs or any songs that told stories. And so I just started doing that. And, you know, I have no talent as a musician. I have no talent I have a horrible voice. And, but I just didn't quit, you know, because it brought me so much comfort being around other musicians, people that like books and, you know, and music, and you have buddies, and then you get addicted to not failing, you know. I get stubborn. So I kind of just stuck it out when most guys would have quit. You know, I was in bands from say 13 to 26, you know, and I wrote songs obsessively like a fanatic, and they were all horrible. And eventually around 27, I wrote one pretty good one. And I was like, oh, I'm not that bad at this. And then I was a near like clinically shy kid that could barely go to school because I was so shy, and being in a band about killed me, but it kind of cured me of that. So in a weird way, regardless of if I'm a good musician or not, it cured me of being kind of a shut-in kind of guy. And then eventually I got better at writing songs, and the interesting thing about that for me anyway is it's my songs that made my novels get published. My band started doing better, and we started having success in Europe, and so people started hearing the lyrics to the songs, and they started asking, do you write novels? Have you ever written a novel? And I happen to have 4 of them in my, you know, 3 horrible ones and one that I liked because it had illustrations above each chapter. and I showed somebody that book called The Motel Life, and they sold it. So they've really helped each other in that regard. And I always think that the songs and the stories kind of all live in the same apartment building, so they're connected. But they've both really helped me in that regard, and they do take the pressure off the other one. So I got lucky and that I've had a good luck run, at least at times, with both. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you for that, Sue. I'm so glad that you saw that article with David Jasper. We adore him for features.
David Jasper's a nice guy. That was really interesting.
He is a good guy. Do we have any other questions or comments? Yes, Greg.
Well, Mr. Reese as a character, and you've written about the West and in a way that I think a lot of people who live in Oregon and other of the states around here that are so culturally divided in terms of politics. And you start addressing what it is to be a rancher in such a way that I wonder if you get a strong reaction from people who otherwise might politically disagree with some of the characters and call them names, but at the same time would recognize that you're speaking about something that's very real to them, and I wonder if you have any crossover effect for people in terms of bringing them together. What do you notice about that in terms of your audience? Because it's a very anti-Trump book. You're writing on the verge of Trump's victory as this is happening.
Yeah, the interesting thing with that is, I guess I'll say it in a few ways. I'm not so sure how many working class people in general, left or right, read novels. I don't think a lot of men ranch guys would read. They might read Ivan Doig, the real literary guys might, but there's only a handful of those, and most of those ranchers that I've met are like lawyers that grew up ranchers, and they started buying land and wanted to get back to it. I grew up in my mom's had a boyfriend, and he was like first generation Rush Limbaugh. Like right when Rush Limbaugh went national, we listened to that every day in our house my whole life. And I guess I watched how it changed my mother and the dynamic, the family, and the conversations we were having. It all shifted, and it got more aggressive in the last, she passed away 10 years ago, but in the last 10 years of her life, say from 2000 on, from Bill Clinton on, the dynamic in the family changed a lot. And then you started realizing, like, I've always went to small towns in Eastern Oregon and Nevada, Northeast Nevada. That's all I ever did as a kid. And as an adult, the only vacations I ever really took were to like the Steens, Burns, Pendleton, Winnemucca, Ely, Elko, those kind of places. And as you get closer to where we are today, it gets more and more aggressively, polarizingly divided. And I don't think anything's really changed out there, but it's what they listen to and what they watch, and you really see it change aggressively. And I think Mr. Reese, when he meets with the ranchers breakfast with all the other old retired ranchers, and he's saying to himself, he goes, look, all these guys have done really well. They all have new trucks. They all have made it okay in life, and their kids more or less have had their American dream, but they're so angry. And I think Mr. Reese, one of the reasons he's scared of stopping to work is because he doesn't want to end up like those guys, and he's frightened of ending up angry all the time. And that was just my personal experience with the way I was raised. That idea of just that low level anger all the time, by listening to certain kinds of stuff and watching that kind of stuff. So I've always been really aware of it. The Free talks about that a lot, that polarization. of what it means to be an American. And I've always been personally, it hits a nerve with me on a bunch of different levels, but it hits a nerve with me personally because I was arty, you know, I got picked on a lot by my family for liking books and liking left-leaning people like Steinbeck, you know. So I've always been sensitive to it, and it's interesting. So I write about it sometimes. And Mr. Reese is kind of like the kind of guy I wish I will be. I wrote him to remind myself that Mr. Reese is the kind of guy I want to be. I don't want to be the guy that watches TV and lives in like Burns, Oregon, or Winnemucca, and complains about that the Muslims are going to take over Winnemucca, you know. And you're like, man, I don't think there are any Muslims in Winnemucca. You have a lot of other things to worry about. You might want to worry about water first, buddy. And but just those kind of conversations are you know why I wrote Say Mr. Reese is a saint, to remind myself that I want to be like that guy and not like the guy that's you meet in a bar and he's just angry, and he drives a nice truck and nothing's changed in his life, but he's super angry.
Yeah, I think we have some of those around Central Oregon too.
Oh yeah, I mean they're everywhere, and I mean it's just interesting. I mean, not to digress too much into that, but I just had a really interesting experience because I still talk to my mom's boyfriend, and he's a really good guy. He was a decent guy to me growing up. But if I call him right after certain news programs, he's just an really angry guy. Like, it's so angry that I have to hang up the phone. And not angry with me, but he's just really angry. And he's got good retirement. My mom gave him a house, you know, he's got it okay. And then I called him up over after he was watching a Hallmark movie, like a really nice romantic Hallmark movie. And I called him after that, and he was like the sweetest, nicest guy. And I wanted to shake him over the phone and go, man, see, if you just watch stuff that has some kind of decency and hope to it, and like, I want to live and try hard, then you're going to be like that. And so it was just, I hadn't heard him in a good mood in so long. And I was like, hey man, what have you been watching lately? And he's like, I just watched the greatest Hillary Swank Hallmark movie. And I just, you know, and you're just like,
timing is everything.
Yeah, timing. Yeah. And what you choose to read or listen to or believe, I mean, it really does influence you. So anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to digress too much.
No, absolutely. I appreciate it. Well, we are about out of time. But I really appreciate, again, everyone who's been here tonight, who's asked questions and made this a really fun event. If you have not picked up a copy of your book yet, please consider buying it from Roundabout. If you're not local, we'd be happy to ship it to you. The store is open Monday through Thursday, 10 to 6, and on weekends and Friday, 10 to 5. We'll ship anywhere. And I do hope that you're able to come visit us in person. If there's an event down at the library, I'm sure you'll see all of us and all of the people who love Paulina Springs and more indie bookstores around here attending. And thank you, Willy, and everyone for supporting indie bookstores, because we couldn't do it without you, and we want to stay around for a long time.
I want you to too. So thank you for having me, and thanks for all the good questions, everybody. And all right.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody. Have a great night. Keep reading. We'll see you soon.
Bye, Liz. Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye,
Thanks, Greg.
Thank you.
Good to know.